talking about the Braun house that is
Well,
up on Seaview.
before we do that, I don't know, that must have been in the 50s, but in the 20s, my grandfather, Big Jack Daglish, owned the Deauville. And that was during Prohibition. And it was when the water was deep and there'd be big boats coming in and they'd have big bands at the Deauville. And people were all in formal dress. It was a very fancy attire, Mary Ann told me.
It's true.
And John,
and
yeah.
the carpet in the dining room at the Deauville was custom made and had hand in cursive writing that they're not going to teach kids anymore. Deauville Inn, all the way across it. It was like a teal or turquoise background with a deep red Deauville Inn scrolled through it on an angle, and laid carpet in that whole dining room. It was still there when Madeline had it. I watched them tear it out. It was sad.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So your grandpa owned the Deauville.
When it was a hotel, it was during Prohibition. They had, my cousin said her dad used to make the gin literally in the bathtub gin upstairs. People did stay at the hotel, or they, stay there for the week or whatever. And I did ask him about, because I had heard that the ladies were upstairs, and he just refused to answer that. It sounds like from my cousin's wife that maybe some attractive ladies or whatever were up on the top floor. And they would be raided, and when they were raided, they had a system where a conveyor belt would go out the window, and the cases of liquor would go right into the bay. And then they were able to pull up the ladder or push, they had a system where maybe the ladder went in the bay.
And you don't want to be on camera, right?
No.
Okay. So then were they able to get that liquor back?
I think so. They just pulled it
They
out of
pulled
the
it back
water
up
after
again.
the
So
raid.
it's probably in wooden cases, not cardboard like we have
Right.
now.
And this was liquor that they made right there at the Deauville.
Well, maybe some of it was, but they also had liquor that came in on boats, and people would know about the boats. So, and I don't know, I just sort of hear some of the story, I don't know the whole story. I just know that they would get word that maybe they'd be raided, or the boats, and they'd throw the alcohol overboard so they wouldn't get caught, and some of the liquor never was to be found.
Yeah, the
So,
bootleggers
no, I don't know
were-
if that
were
came
quite a
from
bunch.
Nucky Thompson, but it was probably the same. It was the same era, so who knows? He may have been the major distributor.
There were a lot of bootleggers.
And then my cousin's dad was a part-time bartender, and then my cousin.
He was Whalen, right?
Right, and then my cousin John Whalen and maybe his brothers, they would do the valet parking there.
And all these Whalens were in town in the summer.
Yeah, they were. Their mom was Big Jack Daglish's sister. So, and they lived in that house. My grandfather owned the house, but they lived in the house. What's that beautiful old school house across from Deauville on the Bayside?
Belongs to Sheridan.
Yeah, Sheridan.
Oh, Sheridan's house.
Yeah. That was their house.
Okay.
Love that house.
Yeah, we used to go over there and visit.
Yeah, and my nana.
Big Jack's
I
wife.
think it was
No, that was
Big
Nana.
Jack's mother, but evidently Big Jack's mother was married several times and had many different children. So, but there was this lady. It was like out of a I don't know, psycho movie. Except I liked her, except nobody else did. But she would be up in the eaves, the
She
dormer.
was always upstairs.
Yeah, she'd
I
be in-
remember her.
Well, they had to carry her up and down. She couldn't walk or anything.
She was
So
very old when we were
Yeah,
kids.
and she'd be in the dormer window, so she would always look at the bay. And she had the long white hair, like down to her waist. And she was old. And then I loved to just comb her hair in the window. And those Whalen boys, they were all big boys, and they would carry her wherever she needed to go in the house, and they would carry her up and down.
I remember going up to visit with her.
Yeah, I liked going, I don't know. I liked combing her hair, I guess.
Now, was the Deauville open year-round at that point?
Let me say this. I don't know. I would assume so,
I think it
because
was.
that was his business, and things here weren't so much summer, winter, I think. I think it was
Well, plus it was
trains came
during
here.
Prohibition. The trains were coming in, and
Yeah.
Atlantic City was in its prime. So, my dad was probably similar in age to Pam's grandfather, Big Jack, and he was born in 1903. So he remembers Prohibition, and he worked for the railroad in Atlantic City when Al Capone used to go to Atlantic City and all the gangsters went to Atlantic City. And that was the era that we're talking about. So because the trains ran in and out of here, not as much in the winter as the summer, but
Because what would be the reason why someone would come to Strathmere in the winter? In those days, I mean.
I don't know. That's before our time.
Well, they may have come specifically to go to some place like Atlantic City or the Deauville that was very formal and had big bands. Just like we follow rock groups, they may have been following big bands and go where the bands played.
Like, yeah,
But
Jimmy
we don't
Dorsey,
know.
Glenn
Yeah.
Miller.
Yeah.
But we don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how active it was in the winter.
Now, just fast forward, I don't know if it was in the 50s or 60s. I'm thinking we were pretty young, but maybe 50s, maybe early 60s. But my grandfather was on the Bridge Commission, and at the time worked for, was it Senator or Governor Sandman?
Congressman.
Congressman Sandman. So my grandmother
He
didn't
was
want him to
congressman.
drink too much because he liked to drink. So she would make him take Debbie and I to these meetings where it was all a whole room of cigar smoking guys with the
It's like
fedoras.
political
They all
rallies.
had the fedoras, they all had the cigars. They were all white men, and you know, he's dragging, not happily, the two young people, because she figured he wouldn't drink if we were in the car. Forget it. He would be swerving.
Didn't make any difference. We were just like his
off
companions.
the road, and we'd be going, Big Jack, or you know,
forgot
start
about that.
screaming or talking. Oh my God, I don't know.
That-
how.
you know, that reminds me of Pam and I both went, and my dad went, and I think Janet went too. The very first Cape May Lewis ferry ride,
Oh.
which was 1964. So
And
we
the
were like
Coast
13,
Guards,
14 years
the
old.
very first.
We went on the very first maiden voyage of
Maiden
the Cape May
voyage.
Lewis ferry.
Yeah.
And the United States Coast Guard band out of the training center in Cape May was on
Nice,
board. Now we're
yeah.
13, so we're like, oh my gosh, this is like wonderful.
And all the handsome Coast Guard.
In
Woo!
uniform,
Yeah.
So we had our best kind of outing kind of clothes on, and we take off out of Cape May, and we were talking a little bit a while ago about the difference in communication then as opposed to now. And when I talk about the 62 storm, it's the same thing. We couldn't communicate like we can now. So anyway, we take off out of Cape May on the ferry, and we get over to Lewis, and the terminal at Lewis and the docks and all that stuff were not completed. So a lot of stuff was still under construction. Well, we wrapped a steel cable around the prop going into Lewis. So now we're dead in the water. The ferry can't move. We're all on board the ferry.
And it was foggy.
It was supposed to be, I mean, I don't remember the time frames, but we left Cape May in the middle of the day. We were going to go to Cape May, to Lewis, turn around, and bring the ferry back. So I would think that we probably should have been back here before dark. Well, they couldn't move the ferry. They had to get divers in with acetylene torches to cut the steel cable that was wrapped around the prop for the ferry. You remember this? You remember
Vaguely,
being stuck
I
over
remember
there?
it being very foggy, so maybe it's because we
The
were there so
sunset.
long, the fog rolled in.
The sunset.
Yeah.
So now it's like dark. I remember getting home, and my timing could be off because I was a kid. I think it was like 1 o'clock in the morning when we got back to Strathmere. My poor mother thought we all drowned because you couldn't call home.
Right.
I mean,
Oh,
if we
yeah.
had been in Lewis, we could have picked up a payphone and said, "Listen, there's a mechanical problem with the boat. We're all okay. We'll call you when we leave here, so you don't worry." You couldn't do that.
Who went on
We're-
that trip?
We're out in the Delaware Bay on a ferry on its maiden voyage with a cable wrapped around
Well,
the
my
prop.
grandfather is the one that got us on, I think, unless you
Yeah,
remember
Big Jack was
differently,
there.
because he was very involved politically, and as I said, the Bridge Commission and the
Yeah, Charlie Sandman was very
New
instrumental
Jersey
in getting the ferry
government.
running.
We used to get free tickets, like slew of free tickets from my grandfather for the Wildwood Amusements, and we'd go twice a year. And he would give us like
Books of stuff.
books and rolls, whatever, of the tickets. Remember, we used to go with Pam McCauley.
I don't know that I
Yeah,
ever
well, maybe
went with
she
Pam
may
McCall.
have gone sometime when Andrea went or something. I don't know.
Who would take you to Wildwood?
It was somebody like Andrea or somebody that could drive. Because we
Yeah,
were the
Andrea-
young, we
Andrea
were the
was a
young
little older.
people. Everybody else was older. Yeah.
So it'd be like teenagers from town that could drive
Yeah.
would take you.
And Wildwood was the big deal. You only did that a few times a year.
Yeah, at the most twice.
Yeah.
But free tickets like crazy.
And I remember when you started to drive, we all went to Henny's for dinner. And you drove.
In Stone Harbor?
Yeah. Trying to think.
Oh, God,
you
I
had
don't
you had
remember
this
that.
you had this tank of a car.
Oh, my green
Like a-
Pontiac.
Was
It was
that
my
what it was, a
car,
Pontiac?
right? It was like a 1950.
It was
Pontiac.
your car. It was kind of like
Yeah.
egg shaped. I remember.
Yeah. It was a 1950
Big.
Pontiac or 52 maybe,
And,
something
and
like that.
very comfortable. And Pam drove.
I think I bought it for $50 or something
I
like
mean,
that.
you went, I went. Something happened.